Hello, everybody.
Back in the office.
Yes, you are. You miss that music, don't you?
I do. I really miss it. It takes me off my game when I don't have, like I have a game, but it takes me off my game. We don't have it. Folks, it's April 12th, 2022. It's a Tuesday. Welcome aboard, everyone. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast. We are episode 572.
All right.
572, you take my word for it.
Yeah.
It's a gloomy but yet warm day here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The flowers are blooming, your eyes are puffy, and the wheezing has begun. For all of you that like spring flowers, yeah, do you really like them that much? Because I don't. You can walk outside and taste the blooming flowers, and it just makes my eyes like water up and puff.
Are you feeling it?
No, I'm not.
You've been ahead of the game.
You know me. I started popping the Cleat in February. I get way ahead of the game. Everyone else, it's all I hear about. It's my throat's scratchy, my eyes are puffy, you know, my nose is running, my ears are clogged, and I'm like, oh, you want these beautiful flowers? That's the price to pay. Or you can just get ahead of the game like I do and start popping the Cleat in February. For those of you popping in, welcome. It's first time tuning in. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general, that your time is valuable, and we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We'll do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We'll do race recaps. We'll also do race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through in life, what our athletes are going through. We work with a wide range of athletes, from beginner level athletes looking at their first sprints or even 5K, all the way up to elite level amateurs trying to get back to Kona, and everyone in between here in the U.S. and also all over. So we'll use the feedback and communication we have with them to drive the discussion. We'll also hop into our Facebook group, like we will today, which is Crushing Iron Group. If you want to be a part of that awesome community, just answer one simple question. We'll let you right in. We'll go in there and kind of take the pulse and do a Q&A like we will today, and like we intended to do last Friday, but we got kind of sidetracked.
And we intend to do today.
And we do intend to do. Look, it's all about intention, right? We're all about intention and effort. And just because you list out 45 questions and we get through 1.5 doesn't mean we're not trying. Okay, we are putting in legit effort. But it is a great community. A lot of awesome people in there, experienced athletes. So feel free to be a part of that community and contribute. Make some comments, give some feedback and some input, and help people out along the way. That's it. We don't do sponsors. We most certainly don't do ads. But the one agenda that we do have is to try our best to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yes. You mentioned something about sleep in the email, the team email.
Yes. And
I've
been focusing hard on my sleep.
Have you? Good.
Yes.
I think it's a quick little thing we get out of the way here.
Okay.
I was up north for quite a while, maybe over a week, a little week and a half. Slept out, basically, a lot of the time slept out in the country, in the woods, by the lakes.
I thought for a minute you were going to say you slept outside, and I was going to call it
outside,
bullshit.
Had a tent.
Yes.
And, no, but I slept like a rock all week, and I came back here last night, and I just
slept like crap, right?
Slept like crap.
We mentioned this, maybe 2 weeks ago. I talked about, there's a lot of apps and devices now where you can measure your HRV or how well you sleep,
right? Yeah.
Your heart rate variability. And the study was basically that people who live in a big, I guess big is a relative term, right? Chattanooga is not a big city, but it's big compared to where you were, right? Sleeping outside along the, the bluebirds and the squirrels and the tulips.
Different kind of silence.
Different kind of silence, right? Different kind of noises, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's and the noises you hear out there are the noises that city folk use to like go to sleep, right? Not like, birds chirping and, things like, the breeze and nighttime sounds and crickets. You don't hear nighttime noises, for meditative apps being like, hey, let's put on some ambulance sirens to go out. That'll probably calm you down a little bit. No one used that. But anyway, the study was basically, it was done that said people who live inside, again, quote unquote, a bigger type city had a worse HRV overall, which is a lower one versus people who lived outside, because it was just more relaxing, less stressful. I had a very similar experience. Obviously, I was on vacation, and even on vacation, sleeping in weird places and weird beds or whatever, you tend to not sleep that great. I took the whole week off work, really detached, slept the best. Felt every day, woke up feeling refreshed, best I've felt in a long time. First entire 5 days back, because I've been tracking my sleep for about 3 to 4 months now. Whole entire week last week, poor.
Oh, really?
Yep. Because you're back in, you're catching up from work. You're a little bit stressed. You have all these things added back in life. And it was just a reminder of how impactful stress is on your life and your sleep, right? The things you think about before you go to bed, the things that keep you up. You wake up in the middle of the night, for whatever reason, and then your mind just starts going and going and going versus like going back to sleep peacefully because you're not worrying about stuff. Stress is real, right? And it just affects us in a lot of ways that I don't think we recognize, frankly, because we've just become so accustomed to feeling like a base level version of stress that when it's removed and we come back to it, it's like a smack in the face. Sorry, Maddie. And it hits you hard, and it's like you're just kind of taken back from it. So yeah, it was a rough last week, but I spent the weekend kind of diving back in and getting a little bit ahead of the game. Got a busy few weeks coming up, but I'm glad you did sleep while you were gone and you banked a little bit. And I'm sorry that you didn't have a very welcome night back.
Yeah, it's a mystery, but not really. I mean, I think it's a lot to do with exactly what you're saying, and plus like I always say, the familiar surroundings. Like there's always stuff that looks like it needs to be done, but if you're on the road and you don't have all that crap from your house sitting around unfinished, you don't even think about it. And but didn't you have weren't you saying you were doing some kind of ritual too or something?
I didn't necessarily start a ritual, but I did. I started reading a book.
I can see you with candles. And
I'm sitting in the middle. I'm sitting in the middle of my bed, with a loincloth on and doing some very meditative yoga, like doing my best Buddhism. No, I started reading a book called The Gap and the Gain, and after reading the first few pages, like usually my mind is always like, at the end of every day, I make a list in my notebook, I basically list out all the things I need to do tomorrow that I didn't get done today. Always kind of like, what do I got to do next? What can I do better? What do I not have completed? Whether it's tomorrow, whether it's in the kind of forecasting the next couple of weeks. And it's always really more about, what haven't I done? What do I still have left to do? Right. And so instead of doing that, I just got a sheet of paper and I listed out, all the things that I accomplished this week. And I got done, or the last week, and I got done doing it. And I kind of looked at it and I was like, damn, you did a pretty solid job this last week. You got a lot of stuff done. And that was what I chose to focus on, right? And I kept reading a little bit more. And honestly, like the first chapter of the book was like a gigantic slap in the face. I was like, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. So I really did try to shift my perspective on things. And honestly, I've slept really well since I started. I mean, it's not a sleep book. It's more about, I think, appreciation, how you look at life and your perspective for quote unquote overachievers or entrepreneurs or people who are just, try to be really, really successful. It's basically just about how much we choose to beat ourselves up over what we haven't done versus appreciating all the things that we have done or that are doing. And I'm notoriously god awful at doing that, right? I'm very terrible at accepting compliments. People say, great job. I'm like, well, let's just wait and see till things are finished, right?
Yeah,
so let's wait. I'm like that, and it's not. And so I think I do myself a disservice by doing that, and I also do, I think, others a disservice by not appreciating the appreciation sometimes. And so I've been trying to make a very conscious effort of being more present and appreciating what I have instead of, the phrase keeping up with the Joneses. And anyway, it all goes back to, I'm not going to ruin it and we'll get onto the questions anyway, but the whole book basically starts with like, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right?
Yeah, it sounds familiar. I've heard that before.
Yeah, right. I think it's in our, either Declaration of Independence or Constitution, one of the two.
Yeah,
but anyway,
it's all right.
He's not trying to like diss on our founding fathers, but he basically says the line, the pursuit of happiness means you are not already happy, or that happiness cannot be achieved. And so you're always looking for ways to be happy instead of appreciating the happiness that you already have. And it just goes in this huge, it starts off by talking about the gap, which is, I think, honestly, most people in endurance athletes in general are in the gap, which is the things you haven't done or how far you are away from your ideal, right? Your ideal time, your ideal life, instead of appreciating how far you've come and living more of a life of gratitude and appreciation and how much more fulfilling that'll be versus always trying to think you're keeping up with the Joneses or have to accomplish something new or you have to make more money or have to do this. And he just found out it's basically like no one is really happy anymore because you're always trying to keep up with nothing, just an ideal that you're not already happy, that you have to be in the pursuit of more happiness.
Mm-hmm. Or you're enjoying the process.
Right.
And I think, that's kind of like what's that gratitude journal that people talk about. And that sounds kind of like what you're talking about. It's like write down stuff like that you're happy, and proud of, or you feel good about, instead of like, oh yeah, it is a weird feeling to always have, like, especially as entrepreneurs, we can always do whatever you want. And then it's like, you don't appreciate everything you did. I've been reading too, but interestingly enough, one of the things I did was, I tend to read books like that, but my mom is a voracious fiction reader. And I was at her house for several of those days, and I just picked up a book one night, one of those mysteries.
Oh, I didn't know if it was one of those, ones you see at Walgreens on the front cover with like the shirtless guy with the loincloth on.
100%,
like
something like that.
Story thing.
This one is called Skin Game.
Explicit lyrics coming up.
CIA mystery.
Interesting.
But I'd always heard, and I believe it, and I know this, but reading, if you're going to read before bed, it should be fiction, because the minute you start getting your head into that space, you start going, okay, well, I got to do that now. I want to, okay, tomorrow's the day. I'm going to start, I'm going to start up, I'm going to start writing and whatever. But anyway.
The skin game. You guys have skin in the game. You got questions. You're like, all right,
so
guys,
funny,
listen. We put up with your bullshit last week.
My mom didn't even remember it.
I'm sure
I said, I'm reading one of your books. What was it? I said, this is Skin Game.
She's like, I might have to read that one again.
She said, who's the character? And I said, it's Teddy. She goes, Teddy Fay. Yeah, he's I love that author. And he, I guess this guy's like a longtime character in several books or something. So that's how she remembers.
I can so see your mom doing that. Your mom sent me a Facebook private message over the weekend. She tell you that?
No.
Yeah. She sent me the picture of you and I after your very first Ironman in Wisconsin.
Oh, really? Was it a memory for her or something?
I have no idea. It's not September, so it can't be. But yeah, it was a picture of you looking, young and sleek and fit, and then your Titleist golf visor, and me looking like a total, overblown alcoholic. It was a really great memory. I'm glad I got to enjoy it. Thanks, Ann. And that's it. In typical mom fashion, there was no commentary. So I was scared to open it because I was like, I'm getting spammed, right? Your mom's probably not. Your mom barely probably knows how to work Facebook Messenger. I'm not gonna pop in and do that, right? So finally, after 3 days, I opened it. So Ann, I wasn't trying to ghost you or anything. No, but I was kind of apprehensive to open it. That was it. Just the picture. That was it of the finishing. I was like, man, those were not the days. But I appreciate
that. They have their value.
They do. They very much have their value. So I chose to take the gain approach to that. But yeah, we will get to your questions. I'm sure you're sick and tired of us talking about other bullshit. But we posted this last week, and you guys had about 35, 37 come in. We'll do our best to get some today, and hopefully get some done for the next cast as well. Number one, Mark Strickland, do you have a basic nutrition plan for the bike portion of an Ironman distance, parentheses, or century ride? I don't. I don't like to use terms like basic in general, because everything is so relative to, it depends on you. And plus, an Ironman distance, the bike leg of an Ironman is so totally different than just doing a century ride, right? That you can't even compare, right? Because a century ride, you're not swimming 2.4 miles before. You're also not going to attempt to run a marathon afterwards. So your nutrition plan would be very, very different. You could probably get away with half the calories on a century ride because you have nothing else to do, right? You're done for the day, versus how much you actually going into a ride, like a 112 mile ride, going into one depleted from swimming 2.4 and probably not feeling a ton in the morning. And then obviously wanting to run your best 26.2 afterwards. So there really isn't a general basic nutrition plan. I think, it's becoming even increasingly popular to try to absorb as many carbohydrates as possible, but neither Mike or I, as you might, have already guessed, are not dietitians or sports nutritionists. Right. So I try not to give out super specific advice and steer you in a very, specific direction. I think because I know just enough to be helpful, but also that can also be just enough to be dangerous. And I think I try to be respectful and honestly mindful of while our platform isn't giant, it does leave an impression, right, on people to give advice and to give things. So I try to be very careful on what I give advice for. Generally speaking, I would say most people take in anywhere between 250 to 400 calories an hour. Some people up to 450, right? And there's a lot of science coming out that you can take in so way more carbohydrates and use them than previously thought. I always suggest athletes go to Core Diet and use their website and do a race fueling plan with them. That's been very, very helpful, and it's super enlightening. It's specific, right? If we spend a whole lot of money on, and we don't get a kickback from them, our athletes have a discount code with them. We don't get a kickback. They're just great at what they do. And it's for you. It's 100% for you. They do a sweat test, they do a specific workout, and they send you this huge, 8, 10, 12 page PDF with things. So I would honestly, instead of, right, like in a sport that's already expensive, right, that you spend, people are so willing to drop $800 for a wetsuit or $300 for an, aero helmet they wear twice a year, or, so many race registrations for races they don't plan to do, or $150 for shoes or whatever it is. Now tires are like $80. It's like, drop the $200 for a race fueling plan and it gives you half marathon, sprint, Olympic, half Ironman and Ironman, like all laid out, specifics. Really? Do it. Just do it. Don't ask guys like Mike and I to give out a basic one. Just drop some coin, right? And do it. Just drop some coin. Like, this podcast is free. Go use the money you would pay for this. So like $5 for, $500, and put it towards that, or ask for a gift. But no, I mean, that's in do that. It is the season to dial things in, not to try and guess your way through. We've mentioned this a lot, and I think it's one of the more, not thought of and overlooked things that athletes do is to take the time and the diligence to write out exactly what you have the night before your long ride, your pre-breakfast, what time you take it in, what time you start your ride, and then, don't just, a couple scoops here, a couple Cliff Blocks, maybe a few bars, like that'll probably make it work. You don't know when you eat them. You don't know how much you take in per hour. You don't know the composition of the amount you take into the scoop. How many carbohydrates, how many electrolytes, how much sodium. You don't know any of it. You just kind of buy a $60 jug of whatever and just kind of half-ass your way through making one. And guess what? You might have one great ride and you're going to think, man, I really nailed it today. That's a perfect nutrition plan. And guess what? You're going to have no idea what you just did. You have zero idea what you just did. You're going to have to go back and guess. So, time it out, list it out. When you're done, see how much, weigh yourself before, weigh yourself after, see how much, fluid and you lose through sweat. Do all these things, because if you really want to run your best marathon, you've got to fuel well on the bike. More marathons are lost, not from a lack of training, but from a lack of pacing and a lack of fueling on the bike than there are anything else.
Well, that's good advice, man. I think I've had a tendency over the years to be that kind of just guesswork, but it's been pretty, I don't want to say scientific, but it's usually pretty consistent. But the one thing I did learn, especially this year, is what happens is if you don't sleep much before the race, like I did, that just throws everything to how it feels when you wake up and you just don't know if you need fuel or if it's even going to matter and stuff like that. For me, it was kind of I had to, shift my game plan, because I was grabbing caffeine about 20 miles into the bike just so I didn't fall asleep this year. But, or like Maurice.
That's right. Maurice fell asleep on the bike. Maurice, we love you, man.
Yeah. You think he's listening? Yeah, he might be.
Yeah, he might be. We love Maurice.
Yeah, so that's good stuff, man. I do think you need to kind of that brings up the point of sort of regiment in general, as far as going into a race and eating at the right times, even days before, and for sure the day before,
for sure,
and getting everything you need as far as calories in the lead up. So I think there's just leave it to the experts.
Yeah, which is yourself. You're an expert of yourself.
Yeah, well that too.
Don't just take what somebody else does and be like, I can definitely do that.
See, that's the thing.
Right? Johnny, he did a 920 at Kona, and he only took in 2 carbs. And he won his age group. And then you're like, yeah. And Johnny was one of 3,000 people, and the other 2,999 were like, you're insane. We're not doing that. And guess what you probably could have done had you had carbohydrates, to use. So yeah, everyone is individual. Fran Bridges, speaking of individuals, the old 220 minus your age equals max heart rate to calculate zones is flawed, in my opinion. What when it is applied to endurance athletes. What are your thoughts on using RPE to calculate zone sets? Yes, the 220 minus your age, and some people use 220 minus your age plus 10 to calculate zones. It's not just flawed; it's total garbage, and you shouldn't use it. It is not just not applicable for endurance athletes. It's just not applicable for the general public. There's so many things.
It's like the grain pyramid,
right? Exactly right. It's all bullshit. Like it's just all of that is it's not outdated. It's just made up, right? It's just pulled out of thin air. Don't use it. If you want to use calculate. I don't know how you can calculate your zones by RPE. I think if you just know how to go on a scale of 1 to 10. And learn how to, listen to your body and what feels super, super easy, what feels moderate, what feels more tempos, / zone 3 or what feels threshold or what feels, at a scale on a scale 1 to 10, what feels all out, keep it very simple. You can do that. I don't know if you can formulate zones for that. If you do want to formulate, a zone based off a zone model based off heart rate, then do the 30-minute test. That's just what I use with athletes who really like to use heart rate in either the bike or the run. Is you and this goes for both. It goes for running, goes for riding, and I'll kind of go through in detail what I would do if I was using Training Peaks, because that's the platform that we use. Is you go out and you do a nice warm up for both running and riding, and then you do a 30-minute all out effort, not a paced 30 minutes, not a I'll wait 15 minutes and then gas it, but the best 30-minute effort you have. You start your clock, and then after 10 minutes, you hit the lap button, okay? And then from that 10-minute mark through the 30-minute mark, at the very end, again, both for your running segment and your cycling segment, you take those last 20 minutes, you take your average heart rate, not your max, not the one you hit one time, but your average heart rate. That is considered your lactate threshold. And then, again, you're not using actual lactate, testing. You're not testing any blood. You are just doing the best guesstimate by doing the format and in the stuff you have to use, the tools you have to use to get as close as you can. Go into Training Peaks. If you're doing running, then you'll go in and you click on and zones. You put your lactate threshold heart rate in, which is again your 20-minute average. You'll click on Joe Friel's running, and you'll use that as your just your running. And it'll calculate your zones 1 through, I think he has like 1 through 7. And then do the same thing for cycling. That will give you and it'll probably be a lot lower than you probably think, because people do things off their max heart rate. Like the beat, the one beat you hit for like 1 second of your 30 minutes, like, that's my max, and your zones are way too high. But do that. And it's not an easy test at all, but it's very accurate. You'll probably find that the heart rate in the zones you should be in are a lot lower than what you think. But if you want to be a lot more accurate, significantly more accurate than any kind of 220 minus your thing or any kind of a guesstimate, do that. It's a great place to start. It gives you a place to be consistent and some zones to stick to. So I would definitely suggest that. And again, RPE is still, it's not the king anymore because it's not fancy and there's no data, to stare at. But running by feel, riding by feel, knowing your body is also very, very important. But you should kind of know, right? The more you do RPE, or at least don't look at your watch till it's over and learn yourself, is always a good thing.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. Big fan of RPE. And so like, how often do you think that it's worth doing something like that?
It depends. You need to have a pretty good base of fitness in you. I would recommend doing it, max 3 times a year. Really, you don't need to do it more than that. At the very, very end of a season, like going from summer to fall, like when the temps are about to change, because obviously if you ran a 30-minute effort when the temps are, 90, your heart rate's gonna be a lot higher than it will if it was 30, right? So that you're gonna get some different zones. I always do it in really 3 different ways. During peak season, right? Once your body's been more accustomed to whatever environment you're gonna be training the most in to kind of gauge improvement. And then the transitioning of seasons, that gives you a more, a specific heart rate zone and percentage wise of what you're more likely going to train in, right? When you've seen huge environmental changes, right? So you're going from summer to fall, huge environmental change, right? You're going from, high dew point, high humidity, high temperatures to no humidity, no dew point, low temps, right? Easier to hit speed, higher to get your heart rate up, right? Because you're not combating all the all the other elements. And then obviously the other one being going from, winter, fall to spring and summer, right? Totally different environment. You want to be, it's like going from inside training to outside, right? It's easier. It's harder to put down watts and your RPE is higher inside versus outside. So a good time to test there. And then obviously, like I said, during peak season, when you've got a really good level of fitness in you and you want to see some kind of improvement, or you feel like your zones may have some overlapping because you're always, your heart rate is getting so low. You're becoming so efficient or so aerobically efficient. Then now it's time for me. You're seeing some overlap, right? You might be seeing, and that goes for anything, right? If you're starting to see overlap and not so much of maybe skipping a color in the rainbow of all the zones blended together. If you're seeing like, a low zone 2 heart rate with a mid zone 3 pace or power, time to readjust your zones, right? It's time for things to look a bit different. If they're barely like, it might be time to adjust my power. Like I hit all my numbers today. That's not time to, it's always when there's like an overlap or things feel too easy, or you just feel so incredibly efficient. And now it's maybe time to look at zones in a different way. Not just because.
Let me ask you this then. What about a 5K? Could you use that? I mean, you can. What about a half marathon?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, half marathon, you could probably look at your top, I'd probably take your highest 20-minute out of that. You could use it. Will it be as high? Maybe your heart rate drift has had a lot of time to get, to get up there. 5K is the same way. It's also very dependent on your 5K time. Are you a 15-minute 5K or are you a 35-minute 5K? Right. Obviously, if it's 30 minutes over, easy, right? You're going all out. If you're a 20-minute-er, maybe take your last 10 minutes instead of the whole 20, right? Because heart rate drift, it takes a while to get up there. Like if you look at your, 5 to 10 minute, but then again, you don't know how long you'd be able to sustain that, right? Because, but it'll ballpark it. It just won't be nearly as accurate. But again, it goes down. Are you a guy running, 6-minute 5K miles? Or are you a guy running 950s, right? And so totally different. Thing, I would also say if you're doing like any kind of testing, like testing your power, testing your heart rate, great time of year if you're doing a sprint or an Olympic triathlon, use it during the bike segment, right? You're going to get a real world all out, 20-minute, but then a 20-minute, or a 1 hour, even getting your 1 hour power from an Olympics is a great thing to do too. But just be very, very aware and cognizant that what you can produce outside is almost so much easier to produce than what you do inside, right? So let's say you use your outside power and it's a lot higher than you used to, and you're going to go back to doing most of your training inside. Expect your zones to feel a lot harder, right? So it's not, you kind of have to have both, right? Because especially depending on what kind of power meters you're using, if they're two different power meters, some people like to have a different power meter, the bike inside versus the one outside, and not all power meters are alike. They all gauge differently. Some read high, some read low. Some are very similar. And then again, if you're using a smart trainer, that's going to spit out different. I mean, I think I did when I was had a stage power meter and a cork, and then using the kicker, there was like a 35 watt range between one and the other. That's just gigantic, right? And from a coaching standpoint, you always have to ask that too, because when you go into races and athletes are using, things like, best bike split to look at, how fast they're going to be. It's like, I always ask them, what kind of power meter do you have? Because some power meters are notoriously read high. And so you might see an athlete, you're like, man, they are crushing it. And you're like, man, I mean, I know they're fit and I feel like I'm pretty competent at my job, but they're not doing that great, right? And you ask them what kind of power meter you use, like, oh, I use this power meter. And you're like, oh, that's why. Like it reads notoriously high. So or some of them read notoriously low. And so you just have to kind of know those things and be aware of them, because it's never an apples to apples comparison. And even within power meters, they'll always tell you, your power is going to be within, a 1 to 2% different, off, right? But as long as it's always 1 to 2% off, it's consistently 1 or 2% off, right? You don't want one that's one day going to be super 100% accurate, and the next day is going to be 10% off. Then you're going through major differences in zones and overlapping that are negative. So again, if you looking at power meters and stuff, you want it to be consistently inconsistent, right? You don't want it to be inconsistently inconsistent overall, the kind of, because that's when you get, again, overlapping and you find yourself in, what you think is zone 2, but it's really in zone 3. And that's when problems begin to happen.
Okay.
Whew, Fran, you worked me over on that one. Windy 2, any Ironman Texas thoughts, tips? We'll do Ironman Texas preview next week. So I won't go into that today. Just be ready for everything, because who the hell knows in Texas? I do know it's been insanely windy there, but apparently, reading Training Piece comments yesterday, it's been windy in every corner of America for the last week.
Yes,
very, very windy, and you guys don't like it at all.
But love it.
Right? Yeah, if it's a headwind, I love it. But most athletes never head out on a ride, and they're like, dude, I got headwind both ways. No one's ever said tailwind both ways. It was incredible. It's always a headwind.
Yeah. And what is the thing, right? It's always the wind is worse than hills, and we've talked about
easily.
But so what do you have to do as an athlete? You have to really work at not letting it get in your head. And it's very difficult. Like I said, we used to train out at the airport, and it was always super windy out at that old airport. And that was one of my things, is I like riding into the wind. I just really, really, really tried to relax, because you're going to be tense as it is. You're like, oh man, the wind. And then you're just, shit, this sucks and whatever. But you have to, it's one of those things where you can, once you get used to it, it's like, that's what I always tell people about hills, is just do a lot of hills. So when you see a hill, you don't go, oh damn, there's a hill. You just do it. And that's what happens in the wind. So like, get your wind practice. I think it's really valuable, because it always seems to bite people. No matter what, even when it's not windy on an Ironman course or something like that. Oh, it's so windy out there. Because I think it's a byproduct of being on the trainer so much that even a 4-mile-an-hour wind feels like it's crushing you when you get outside, if it's hitting you right in the face. You know what I mean? Any kind of wind. So you just want to be able to, I guess, be familiar with it and be comfortable and relaxed in it. The same goes for the choppy waters or whatever,
It's mentally debilitating.
Yeah.
To ride in the wind, because it's frustrating, right? Yeah. Because it so directly affects your speed, right? And the amount of effort it takes for some people to just stay on their bike, right? So that takes effort out of you. Like, I think we talk about it all the time, when we get so much feedback, oh, you guys hate smart trainers, you guys hate trainers. No, we don't. I appreciate them. We use them all the time. We suggest using them a lot, but there's also no replication. I know you're not a fan. Yes, I am. I'm just not a fan of total reliance, right? I'm just not a fan of total reliance. Get outside, because you see it this time of year. People get outside and they're smoked after an outside ride.
Yeah.
Especially, you don't understand, right, how much effort it takes to hold onto your bike in aero, stay positioned, your core is tight, your arms are going to be fatigued. Most of you probably haven't swam enough because it's early in the season, and you don't think that energy is going to take it out of you and take off 10 minutes of your bike and maybe 10 to 15 off your run. It's all affected. It's all extra stress, and it's all energy you have to use. And it's the mental, it just wears on you. It just mentally drains you, because you're putting out an effort that you think, right, the past 3 to 4 months you're doing a flat course, you're like, man, I could be cruising 20 right now, and I'm cruising 15. And so everyone's first thing is like, I can't let my average miles per hour go down to 18, because my goal is that I've been using Tricock for the last 4 months, and I got to go to the bike. And I'm like, no, they just were pressing it. People blow up, right? People are more apt to blow up on windy bikes than they are off anything. One of the best bike legs, smartest bike legs I've ever ridden in my entire life was 3-4 years ago at Texas 70.3. We had a massive headwind on the way back into town. And on the way out, I averaged 220 watts. And went like close to 30 miles an hour. And on the return trip, I had saved it, because I knew what I was getting into. And again, like that's one of those things where, when you look at, a course, if it's a straight out and back, then yes, right? You know what you're going to get, right? If you come out and you have a huge tailwind, you know what you're going to get. So you can consciously make that real-time decision and prepare. I know what I'm going to get on the return trip is a absolutely gigantic headwind. Well, in a course like Texas or other courses where it's not totally flat, right? You might kind of guess what you think is going to be the answer, but you're not going to be totally prepared for what it's going to be, because you might be going in a circle, might be doing a big loop or whatever. So it makes it easier to pace, right? But I think the biggest thing is you can't worry about speed. You just can't. You can't worry about speed. You can't focus on it. You have to, you just have to be patient. Even if you don't want to, you have to be patient. I think I'm trying to pull up my yeah, so I pulled up my ride from that day real quick, since we're doing communities, April 8th, 2018. On the first part of it, the first hour, and my bike was 225. It's 30 miles. We'll just do close to half. We'll call it that. 107 I did. Okay, so I was off. My normalized power was 218. My average watts were 260, so very even ride. But my speed was 25 miles an hour on the out. I'm not a 25 mile an hour bike guy. I'm just not that fast. But I knew what I was getting was I was getting a little bit extra. So again, on the way out, I was very even. 216 average power, 218 return trip. That gave me 25 miles an hour. And then the rest of the ride, which is basically the turnaround, normalized power was 230, right? And my speed was only 21. So I raised my normalized power by over 10 watts, but I was 4 miles an hour slower.
Yeah.
That's because what happens?
That's a mind F.
It's a huge mind F, because you see that turn, you're like, dude, I'm going to PR today, only to increase your power and then watch it slowly get back down to what you expected, right? It forces, it's just hard. And I think the wind is the biggest thing when you think about Texas, and obviously it could be really, really, really hot. It's just wind and pacing. But again, we'll do a more in-depth one on Texas. Then Coach Nicole from the Woodland Stead said, start taking your allergy meds. So go ahead. And if you're not popping your Claritin like Coach Robbie, better start popping it right now, because if you're popping it now, you're popping it too late. Lisa Prawn, I've heard you mention cleat placement several times on the podcast. As I look to go get a bike refit prior to kicking off the season, should I make sure that this gets addressed? What types of issues, concerns does proper cleat placement actually help? Thanks, guys. Cleat placement and or the need to have shims put in between your cleat and your shoe is like one of the most overlooked and ignored parts of getting a bike fit. And I ask a ton of questions, especially when athletes, honestly, when they're having trouble running, because you can create a lot of niggles and injuries and problems on the bike, but they're not exacerbated because it's no impact, right? 'Cause you can kind of get away with kind of aggravating it, but when you go run and the impact you have and the biomechanics you might have, it's going to be magnified. So when people have usually running injuries or little niggles or like an IT band, issue that's popping up or things, I'm like, wait a minute, we're not, I always kind of go through the checklist, right? Are we ramping up mileage too quickly? No. Have you been running a ton? No. Right. I always go honestly away from running and I ask, simplistic questions. Have you been sitting a lot more than normal? Well, yeah, I've been driving a lot. And I wonder why your IT band is super tight. You're sitting in a car, you're sitting at your desk, right? Get a standing desk, get up and move around. Are you working out a lot and then going straight to sitting down, right? You're going super tight, working by like going straight to sitting down. Have you had a bike fit recently? Your saddle height might be too high, it might be too low. Your saddle might be too forward because that causes you to overwork certain muscles. If it's too high, you're probably overextending. If it's too short, because it could be causing, lateral knee pain. Have you gotten your cleat placement? Is it too far? Is it too far in front? Is it too far back? You're overworking your calves too much, in certain ways. Because people think, people make such a huge deal about buying running shoes. Well, I pronate and I supinate, so I went and got this one. It was a perfect fit. People just hop in cycling shoes and they act like they're perfect. Look and see what you need. Like I've had shims in my cleats for probably 10 years. And some of you might need shims, different levels, different thicknesses, in and out of them to make sure you're not, your knees not buckling in or, your heel's not kicking out or your feet aren't, pronating or supinating in your cycling shoes. You think about how hard everyone works on their bike. Most people work harder on their bike than they do on the run, right? You don't see people hitting, trainer road type, group crit races on Swift when they run. They go for an easy run. Like, this is guy might run. Like, no, do you really not think that you have a giant platform, which is the bottom of your shoe, versus the very tiny contact point, which is your pedal, and you're trying to produce all this power with an increased cadence, right? And your knee might be moving in or might be out. Your ankle, your heel might be pointed in or pointed out. All this, your side might be too high, your side might be too low, you might be too forward and your hip angle might be too close. Another really true indicator of hip flexor, tendonitis or things like that. It's not if you're run. It's probably because you're sitting so far back in your saddle. Your hip angle is so close. That what do you expect? And I don't know this because I'm a doctor or a PT, obviously, but I've been doing this for so long that, and I don't go to a chiropractor. I'm not a huge fan of them, to be honest with you, but triaging things is very much not like, okay, you have a problem here. Let's look at all the other places that are probably going to cause a problem, not exactly at the problem. Let's look at everything else, and let's ask realistic questions. That it should be just common sense, but we always, go straight to the, well, it's gotta be this, it's gotta be that, maybe I need this. I'm like, just use, my feet are hurting. Well, have you, have you got new shoes in a while? Like, I don't track mileage on my feet or on my shoes. I just know if I go out for a run that felt a lot harder on my bones than it usually should, I'm like, yeah, I'm time for new shoes. Right. And then usually wait 2 more weeks and do it. But it's just, you have to ask those questions. And yes, cleat placement, because again, think about it, how hard so many people work on the bike. People are way more apt to do intensity and threshold, VO2 max stuff on the bike than they are on the run. And think about how small the contact point is, right? For how hard you're working. People get up and do out of the saddle sprints. Like, that affects your tendons, your ligaments, your muscles, the strain you put on your skeletal system. Just because you think it's no impact, right, on the ground and in the feeling you get at the surface of the concrete or the pavement, doesn't mean you're not torquing or moving or twisting your body and your legs, more importantly, in ways that it can't be. Then you're going to go off and run with that impact and have no forgiveness, and then not expect it to cause problems. And so I generally think most people's, again, as long as you're not ramping up mileage or hitting way too many hills way too often, then your problems are more likely from the bike than they are from the run.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I totally agree with the shims and the placement and the pedals and everything like that. But I also think that, because I always think about, like how often we do the same exact motion and things like that. So, if you got a weak spot, whether it's your IT band, like you're saying, you're tight in your hips, whatever that's going on. I like to address those things outside of the bike as well. That's why I always talk to my athletes about things like yoga or dynamic flexibilities and strengths and things like that, because I think that, too often we kind of, I'll just say, I haven't, I got that new bike last year I got on and I thought it fit perfectly. Maybe it was just total luck and stuff like that. And I've had bike fits from people that I didn't like and that it didn't feel good. So there's just so many variables, man. The right person has to do it. If you're super tight, I don't know if there's really ever going to be a perfect bike fit for it, things like that. So I just like to think of it sort of as, taking care of your own terrain and making sure your whole body is in good shape and flexible and strong and things like that too. So, you know what I mean? I'm just saying, don't throw all your eggs in a like, hey, put the cleat in the right place thing too, because I think we can get so caught up in, one little thing like that, when I think there's a whole well-roundedness about this sport that we have to maintain for our bodies. And,
everything affects everything.
Lucky. Yeah, everything. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, what I'm saying is if you know what I mean? Like if you're super tight in your hips or something like that, and they create a bike fit to fit that doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be a long-term solution for you either. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that go into it, but just to, figure out how to, I think just that overall health of the body and versatility really goes a long way too.
Yep. Evan Wetzel. My goal Ironman is in October, and I'm unsure how much I should be pushing myself right now. I feel like I know how to put together 4 to 6 weeks of training to get ready for something big. What do I do before that time? When it's too early to be constantly in an Ironman specific build, how can I push myself consistently without wearing myself out? You use a word, there that I think is also like, I mentioned how, big city is a relative term. Pushing yourself is also very relative, right? Like,
right,
should you be overextending and having to drag yourself out of bed to try and hit one more intensity session or one more speed workout or one more long ride in April? No, you shouldn't. Right. And I think, not babying isn't the word, but pacing yourself mentally and emotionally when you're training for an Ironman is just as important as pacing it physically. And no, you shouldn't be anywhere near Ironman specific type, because that to me, that's distance and race pace, over race pace intensity at longer distances, huge volume weeks. you shouldn't be doing that, right? You should be, we use the phrase train so you can train like you need to train and get ready for race day. You should be in that initial train phase, right? You should be very, very, very in the infancy stage, especially because you've been freaking inside for forever, right? You've been inside. People, that's, again, you see that a lot right now. People are burnt out from riding their stuff inside. They need some vitamin D and some sunshine. They want to get outside. They want to be able to do the things they want to do. They want to see friends. They want to hit some group rides. They want to remember why they love riding their bike so much, because it's not because they get no one like, I think I'm going to ride my bike a lot. I love riding my bike. I ride my living room 24/7. Some people are like that. Most people start riding a bike because they love to get out and go things and go places and do things with people. So no, I would be in more of a, I would still be in your preparatory phase, like just becoming super aerobically, efficient. You want to go on some longer rides, go on some longer rides when you get outside, but it's a great time for you being so far away in October is, be focused on your weaknesses, right? Maybe put in some focused training blocks. If you're a weaker cyclist, put in some heavy, or some heavy cycling blocks. If you're, traditionally a weaker swimmer, put in some heavy swim blocks. Same thing for running, and do them now, before it gets really, really, really hot outside. Everybody waits to become a good runner in July, and then they hate it, right? Because
check.
And I've always says, if you hate running, you're running too fast. I'm just telling you right now, if you hate running, it's because you run too fast all the time. No one hates running. And you and I get comments like this all the time. I never thought I could love running until you guys started coaching me, because we tell you to slow that down, right? So you can enjoy it, not go out and be lung busting anaerobic from minute 1 to minute 30. I would hate that too. No, thank you. Right. Mm-hmm. So don't make it that hard and that fast. Just get out, put in the work, build your aerobic base, and remember that, again, pushing yourself it shouldn't be pushing yourself, right? And it should be adhering to, a structured plan or a goal. But yeah, set something up, want to get faster right now. Try to get faster in your open half marathon, or your, 100-hour power, or your, 200, 400 yard swim. Like, do those little carrots that can be meaningful. But don't be pushing yourself in the ground in April. You have a long, 5 months, May, June, July, August, September, October, 6 months. You got a long ways to go, man. So pace yourself, and remember that you need to be crisp. And if you're pushing yourself now, allow yourself a week in maybe June or July to do nothing, to unplug, do zero things triathlon related, and just kind of split your season up into segments instead of feeling like it's got to be the longest season in the history of seasons. Yeah. Because most of you have had a 2-year season already with 20 and 21, and some have already 22.
Right. I mean, pushing yourself, that's why I'm such a big RPE guys, because like pushing myself today means a whole lot different than it does in 2 months, Mm-hmm. And I always like to wake up and, if you feel great, how do I say, push it, or like stretch yourself maybe a little, but don't overdo it. It's always that kind of balance. And how do you flirt with this? Like, okay, I can let my body go a little bit more right now. And I am going a little bit faster and keeping my heart rate the same or whatever, but without, digging the hole, because that's always the big challenge, right? It's like, mm-hmm. how do you stay out of that hole for 6 more months? You don't want to go in it, and you just want to kind of keep looking forward to things. So yeah, I think pushing it, man, it's one of those things that a lot of people have questions about that. How do I know if I'm pushing myself enough? That's always the question I get. And well, you just got to know. I mean, like if you're going to be wiped out for the next 3 days, yeah, that's too much. But if you can kind of like, I don't know, it's, it's just like if you're in a work groove and you kind of feel like you can knock out a few more, assignments for the day.
I always ask
people,
feel
better today, but like tomorrow you might want not to do anything.
Yeah. I always ask people when they say like, I just don't feel like, they always ask, how do I know if I'm pushing myself enough? Mm-hmm. And I always ask them, have you ever felt like you've done enough? Well, no, I'm like, then that's your perpetual really state of being, right? It's like you never feel like you've done enough. You never feel like what you've done is enough, right? It's either fast enough or hard enough, or you're not motivated. It's that's just your personality. Is you're constantly stuck in I haven't done enough, right? Mode versus I'm really happy with what I've done, right? And focusing on that. Jeff, compact versus standard chain rings, also crank length, super specific to, I'm not even going to touch on crank length because it's so different based on bike fit, leg length, and and what your actual focus is. And same thing for chain rings. I mean, again, way too many people overanalyze, but you know, hilly bike courses, you can get away with, you know, you're not getting with, you want a lot more options, right? So you're gonna have a different chain ring, different cassette than you are on a flat course like Florida or Arizona, where some people do the one ring, right? They don't have any options but one ring. That's become super popular, but you don't see people running that at St. George, right? So it depends on leg length, bike fit, goals, experience. It's crank length is way more dependent on your bike fit and your morphology than is anything else. And then compact versus standard chain rings are going 2 by 1 by is also indicative of your type of power and what you can do. You might see some people using one chain ring only, you know, using, you know, electronic shifting on a flat course like Florida. But if it's going to be super windy, you're not a very strong cyclist, you're going to want you're going to want a small ring, you know? So again, that's very, very, very dependent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't have a lot to say about that one.
I didn't think you did.
Well, I mean, I just like to become a strong cyclist, you know, and I know like, I'm sure that matters, if you really got it screwed up, but I don't know. I just feel like, you know, it's, if you're in Ironman or triathlons, I just feel like you know, we talk like St. George, this looks like it's going to be tough, right?
Mm-hmm. Very tough.
So that could be a really good exception. But for the most part, I just don't think Ironman bike courses are really that devastating.
Most of them aren't. Yeah. I mean, but again, it depends on how strong or how weak of a cyclist you are. You know, it's like, you know, that's
what I'm saying. It's like, let's spend time getting strong.
What's relative, right? Last one. This one's right up your alley.
All right.
Scott Studham. I've never been able to run every step of a full Ironman or half Ironman. I always end up walking at some point. I am doing Ironman Chattanooga. My only goal is to run every step. Yes, even the aid stations, only because if I walk, it is hard to start running again.
Or Mike will get pissed at me.
Yeah, or Mike will call you a loser. No, he won't.
I'm way over that phase.
Yeah, he's way past it. I'm a heavy guy in his late 40s, 220 pounds. I mean, again, heavy's relative. Bike FT 255, run FTP. I'm not even gonna go there on run power. Swim 210. But I love the sport and want one where I want to run it. I listen to your podcast while swimming. I don't know. There's a question there. But you're doing great, Scott. Listen, running the full half or the full marathon, honestly, is, in my opinion, it's more about appropriate swim training, bike training, and and how mentally prepared you are.
I agree with that,
because running the whole marathon is going to absolutely suck ass. I'm just going to tell you, no matter how fast you are, right? Again, talking about going, Ironman courses and speed and power, it's relative. It's so hard to run because of the day has been so long and it's so demanding. No one looks like they're having fun, right? And every step of the last 10K, and honestly, once you hit the turnaround at the halfway point of both, you're going to see an advertisement for for more people walking than you are running on both. It's not even close on a full. You're going to see, and you're like, oh, well, they're doing it. And I bet you that feels really good. You're going to want to do it. And so you have to be prepared to think, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Now, is that going to take a lot of swim training? Yep. Is it going to take a bike training? Yep. Is it going to take, being smart and preparing yourself on the run? Yep. Is it going to take mentally preparing yourself to refuse to walk? Yes. It'll take just as much mental and emotional preparation to convince yourself that or make a pact with yourself. I refuse to walk today. I refuse to walk today. It might hurt, but I guarantee you can probably run. Most because guess what? You all find that little 400 meter K, 400 PR that when you hit the red carpet, everybody finds that second gear. Everyone. And so you've got it. You just got to know it's going to suck. It's going to suck bad. And it's going to be really, 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 really uncomfortable. And as Sebastian Kienle famously said before he won his second Ironman World Championship, if you're confident going into an Ironman, if you're confident and you're not worried about the distance when you go into an Ironman, you're probably overtrained. And so you have to go into it being fresh and fit, because honestly, fresh and fit is when you're the most, I think, mentally and emotionally ready to combat all the negativity. If you feel broken and stale and overtrained, you're going to be, especially if you're going into, taper week and you're like, I can't wait to get this over with. Like, I'm so done. Already got your bike on eBay. You're ready to get the first sign of an obstacle or an inconvenient moment or a weakness or pain or discomfort. You're going to look to just, okay, it's over now. I can walk my way to the finish line. I'm already done. And then I've made it. You have to prepare on so many levels and make that pack with you. Because yes, once you start walking, boy, does it feel good, right? It's like, when people, are on a very, very, very strict diet and they remove all these things from their diet. I'm not having any sweets for 6 months. I'm going to lose 45 pounds on April 10th. And then they have one piece of chocolate. You think that's all they have? Nope. They're like, oh my God, that was so good. Like, I've missed this. You have 9,000 Cadbury eggs. And then you go to your apartment and you go to your trunk and you get out 19 different trunk cookies and you binge on them. So no, it's just as much mental and emotional as it is physical, honestly, if not more, to force yourself to run the whole marathon or half. Yeah,
that's the walk becomes it's just a temptation, really. And as I was listening to this God, what was his name? Some Zen guy. But anyway, he said the devil is crafty. He says, so do never announce your intentions, because he will up the temptations or whatever. And I just thought that was really great. And there's another thing is we all, I guess, is your goal to run the marathon, or is it to have your best race? And I'll never forget, it was when Louisville was back in August. I went and watched you guys, and it was 3 weeks before my first Ironman, and I was watching our buddy Corey, and I had no idea, super new to the sport. We'd worked together all year, and I thought I had a plan or whatever. And I didn't expect him to do as well as he did that day. It was super hot, and I don't know if you remember, but he had a good race. He
doubled his 70.3 times, subtracted an hour.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, we saw him do a 70.3, and we was like, he's gonna really. But I think he was under 12 hours. 12 hours.
He was, yeah.
And it was super hot that day, tough day. And I asked him afterwards. I said, what was your strategy on that run? He goes, well, I just walked all the aid stations, and of course that's a common thing now, but I'd never heard that. And so a lot of times I think that if you can go in, depending on what you're going for, but if you go into that Ironman thinking about it as 1 mile, 1 mile, 1 mile, yep. 1 mile, and then you get what you need at the aid station walk, 15, 20 seconds, whatever that is, to get your fuel and everything like that, and just break that marathon up by miles. I don't always do it, but sometimes I get in that groove, and it really makes a difference, I think. So
would you rather walk all the aid stations and run the rest, or walk an entire mile?
That's right? The problem. You get out in the middle between an aid station, you're like, shit, I got half a mile to go.
You got to know what's going to mentally help you get to the next one by running, right? Mm-hmm. And if that's what you need to do, or I'm going to run the first half, and then after that I'm going to walk to the aid station, make sure I got fueling, right? So break it down like that. Break it down to where, but also know you're like, man, if I stop, is it going to be? I'm in for a rude. Again, like that. The whole day, race day is all about negotiating. It's all negotiating inside your head. It's all right. I'm gonna do this. Like the best marathon I ever ran, I was on my third loop, and I was having the best day ever. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna walk this little pincher, and that's all I'm allowed. But I waited to the very last one.
Yeah.
Because I kept telling her, I'll do the next one. And then I got there and I was like, I think I can make one more, right? And you're just negotiating how long you can put off the walk. And I said, all right, when I get to the top, I'm done. I've only got 3 miles left. You're not going to walk. It's going to hurt really bad, but that's it. I get my one reprieve, right? Or know when you're going to have it, right? Up this hill. And that way you have it to like, it's at mile 22, and I'm just going to see how I feel. Because I kept telling myself at mile 14 or 15, all right, don't walk yet. Make it the next one. I just make it the next one. Right? Yeah, make it the next one. Because you think, you play those like mind games. You pass the aid station, like, less than a mile. You're like 0.99. You're like less than a mile. But telling yourself that makes it easier, I think, to negotiate continuing on at the pace you are. And then, once you get a certain distance from the end, you're like, I want it over, right? I want it over now. I want it over quick. And the quickest way for it to be over is to run. And it might be over 10 minutes quicker. And let's be honest, the quicker you get to the finish line, the better food you get in the tent.
Yeah. And you're at 100%. It's a mental game. You just got to say no to yourself a million times.
Yep.
And like you said, there's another thing is, it's not going to hurt any worse. It just hurts.
It's not.
It's just going to hurt the same, but you just got to suffer through it somehow.
Yep. It's not going to hurt any worse. And we hope this podcast didn't hurt you. We'll get the rest of the questions on later this week. As always, we appreciate you. We love you. Thanks for contributing to our podcast today by listing your questions in the closed group. Again, that's Crushing Iron Group on Facebook. Head over to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. And also our gear tab if you want to support us that way. You can also click on the coaching tab and figure out the coaching options that we have for the rest of the year. Looking for help leading up into your big races. And if you're coming into town for Chattanooga 70.3, come see us. Not at the hub, but at the expo. We are doing our very first booth. We will be there, or I'll be there. Mike will be there some. He'll probably have some special guest appearances, signing autographs and taking selfies in 30-minute slots. So we'll do RSVP for that here in the next week or two. But come on,
where else am I going to?
But come by and see us. We're gonna be there. Have some gear and looking to meet everybody. We figured it's a much easier way to see everybody at athlete check-in and being around the groups. We look forward to meeting you guys. Come by and check out some of our new gear and say hello. As always, if you need anything from Mike, he's available at crushingiron@gmail.com. And if you need anything from me specifically, I'm at c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, buddy. I'll see you later.